You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I don't talk in real life about having hoarding disorder, so I talk about it on this podcast instead. And because I'm anonymous, I can talk really, really honestly. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I am well. I am a bit busy and overwhelmed and grumpy about the weather, but I'm fine. Recovering from hoarding disorder is not a race and it's not a sprint. We might feel a lot of pressure when we start to want to get better and when we start to want our surroundings to be different. We can apply a lot of pressure to ourselves, or we might feel a lot of pressure from our friends or our family or our landlord or professionals to fix it all very, very quickly. There can be a bit of an expectation that once we make a decision or once we make a start that it should be fixed. We just power through and do it all. But dehoarding a home is not a quick fix situation. And in order to achieve what is really a gargantuan task, it needs to be sustainable progress more than big dramatic actions. And when we want something to be sustainable, we need to think about the pace we work at. And so I want to talk today about why pacing is important. That's both in terms of the physical stuff around our home, but also the emotional side of things, and how we can find a rhythm that works for us to move us forwards, but not lead us into injury or exhaustion or burnout. In terms of the physical side of things, the physical work of sorting through stuff, making decisions, organising it, getting rid of things, taking donations to the charity shop, taking recycling to the tip. It is relentless and exhausting. It's not even just moving things around. There's bending, there's lifting, there's reaching. But there might also be dust. There might also be things you don't really want to be dealing with. There's discomfort involved physically. There's a lot of labour. Because our spaces didn't fill up overnight. We didn't wake up one morning living somewhere like this when the day before it had been like a regular home. And so unfortunately that also means that reversing that is also not an overnight situation. And if we push ourselves too hard physically, which can be tempting, whether we are very stressed or whether we just get very determined, there are risks. One of the risks is physical exhaustion and injury. We might hurt our backs, we might strain muscles, we might get headaches from being tired or not taking enough breaks, or from dust or from spraying chemicals. And anybody with chronic pain or chronic health problems or disability is probably already feeling pain and headaches and exhaustion, and so may have to take extra care. So pacing can be extra important for certain groups of people, but it is important for everybody, because when we push past our physical limits, it doesn't make us stronger. It sets us back by days or weeks even, as we recover from that pulled muscle or the general knackeredness that we feel. And when we're exhausted, we might find decision making harder, which can lead us to lose confidence in ourselves, lose trust in ourselves. We might be so chaotic if we're really pushing ourselves that we get everything out, fully intending to sort it all out in one go and end up with an even more overwhelming mess than we started with. Like someone emptying their whole wardrobe onto the bed and going, right, that means I have to sort it before bedtime. But what that means is that by bedtime, they've still got most of their stuff on the bed. They've got nowhere to sleep. There's stuff everywhere. And the space is less functional than it had been. And the visual chaos of that, the visual overwhelm, as well as the sense of disappointment or like you've let yourself down, is miserable. And that mess then might be there for months because you've really put yourself off dealing with the clothes. Another problem if we push ourselves too hard, one of the core problems if we push ourselves too hard is burnout, that just makes us stop altogether, makes us quit entirely, give up, do nothing for ages. When we push ourselves into a kind of physical collapse, we start to dread the work. We might lose sight of why we're doing it. We might start questioning whether we want to do it. We might just shut it out and not think about it because it's incredibly tiring. And we start associating dehoarding and doing the work with exhaustion and pain, which then makes us avoid restarting, maybe for months. The work becomes something punishing rather than a way to improve our lives and improve the lives of the people we live with. But there's also a more emotional side to pacing as well, which is in some ways even more critical than the physical side. Because when we are dealing with hoarding disorder, we might often have an unusual relationship with the items in our home. We might have many associations or feelings or memories associated with things that most people would just look at and feel nothing. Every object we pick up and try and make a decision about can carry memories, which might be happy memories, they might be devastating memories. Objects can be associated with grief or with nostalgia, or like Dr. Jan Eppingstall and I talked about in last week's episode, who we are as people, our very identity. Objects can cause us anxiety, and the decision-making process about the items in our home can be really challenging. It's just the reality of hoarding disorder. Every object can trigger questions like, what if I need this? What if I let go of this and then I forget the time it's associated with? What if I give this away and it looks like I don't love the person who gave it to me? What if I throw this away and that's disrespectful of the person who owned it before they died? What if this was important to someone else and I get rid of it? What if I make the wrong choice? That kind of flooding of emotions and complicated thoughts is something that a lot of people who have tried to dehoard can relate to. It's that feeling that everything is just too much. Our head is spinning. And when we keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing past our capacity to deal with that level of emotion and confusion and decision making and feeling, there are some negative things that can happen. Firstly, panic or anxiety, that kind of overwhelming lying awake at night worrying about stuff. If we're pushing ourselves too hard, that can really linger whether we're still sorting or not. We might replay decisions we've made again and again and again. We might feel anxious or question ourselves relentlessly, feeling really unsettled and unsure of ourselves. And we've taught our brains and our bodies that sorting through stuff is dangerous for our mental health, that working to dehoard our homes causes a feeling that feels very much like crisis. That doesn't help us. That doesn't help us to make progress in our homes in the bigger picture. Alternatively, if we keep pushing ourselves beyond our emotional capacity, we might just avoid it all entirely. It can just feel traumatic. Our brain starts to convince us that for the sake of our well-being, we have to not dehoard because it's so traumatic to do it. We end up procrastinating, we make excuses, we feel guilty about not doing it, but we can't do it. We genuinely can't make ourselves start because we've started associating dehoarding with being traumatized because we've pushed ourselves so hard. Also, when we push ourselves too hard, we can essentially lose confidence in our ability to make thoughtful, useful, rational decisions about what truly serves us, about what deserves a place in our home. When we are flooded in that emotional way, we're in a kind of survival mode, and that can lead us to keep everything because we're panicking, and we know that having stuff around us might calm our anxiety, might calm our panic. So we frantically keep everything to reduce our anxiety, which means we don't make progress. Or we might panic and get rid of everything and then panic about that. Neither of those extremes serves us really or helps us to develop a healthier relationship with our possessions. And if we push ourselves too hard and end up flooded emotionally, we can damage our relationship with the very idea of recovery. If we start thinking of recovery as something damaging instead of something we're doing because we care about ourselves, or we care about the people we live with, or we want more freedom, or we want to be able to live according to our hopes and dreams and values, we lose sight of that when we consistently push past our limits. Then that becomes something to dread, something traumatic, something that hurts us and that feels impossible, and we lose track of the actual point of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's important in all of this, when we are trying to not rush ourselves, when we're trying to pace ourselves, to recognize that just like we can't get rid of every object we own overnight, we also can't get rid of every problematic way of thinking or tricky relationship with stuff overnight. Our emotional responses to our possessions doesn't transform overnight, just like our home doesn't. We might hope that once we start working on our space, we'll suddenly feel magically calm and rational about every decision, about letting things go, about not bringing things in. We might hope that we stop feeling any anxiety or dilemmas or confusion when faced with a dehoarding decision or an acquisition decision. And when we expect that kind of miraculous shift, we set ourselves up for disappointment, because that's not how dealing with a complex condition like hoarding disorder works. It has taken years, probably decades, maybe our whole life, for our relationships with objects, our attachment to objects, our response to stress. Those pathways are well worn in our brain. They're very familiar, and they're really wired in with how we cope with life, how we manage anxiety, how we manage trauma. They've served a purpose, even if maladaptive, even if not ideal. they've done something for us, these objects and these thinking patterns. But chances are, at some point, they stopped being helpful and started being an impediment to how we want to live our lives. They're not serving us anymore, even if they did at one point. It takes time to start creating and strengthening new pathways, new associations, new ways of thinking. That's just how brains and emotions and feelings and humans work. Whereas if you made a decision to start dehoarding and then you're not miraculously cured, you might feel, well, this is pointless. You might find yourself 6 months into starting and suddenly have the kind of panic about an object you haven't had for a long time. You might still feel the pull of just in case, or what if I need it, or if I get rid of this, that's disrespectful to the person who gave it to me. With certain items, even after you've been dehoarding for a long while, you might be doing really well and then still have a week where you're second guessing every decision and agonizing over things that the week before would have been a relatively easy choice to make. That familiar anxiety comes back. I've had this in a slightly different way with a PTSD relapse this year that has brought up things that I thought were about as settled as it was possible for these things to be. I thought I'd done this work, and I have, but I'm suddenly having to do it again, and it doesn't feel great. But it does reflect how mental health problems work. It reflects how our reactions and patterns and emotions work, and it reflects that progress and recovery are not just a straight line from start to finish. We're humans with very real human mental health problems that we're trying to deal with, and physical surroundings that make it incredibly difficult to deal with them. This podcast is sponsored by Chirp Your Home, a decluttering and organising course for overwhelmed people. Amy, a declutter coach and professional organiser, has condensed down a range of tools and techniques which she's developed with clients over the past 5 years. Chirp Your Home is a course that uses a mixture of reflective exercises and practical tools with lots of options and opportunities to adapt methods to work for you as an individual. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. The course is in audio format with accompanying worksheets, and it's split across 4 modules. If you're worried about finding the time to work through the course, Amy also runs a free body doubling group twice a week that you can use to work through the course in your own time. Visit chirpyourhome.podia.com, that's chirpyourhome.podia.com, and use voucher code OCHPOD for 15% off. We can also, though, just as we might feel like we're seeing things getting worse in terms of our emotional responses, we will also see things getting better. We might find that we can sit with discomfort for longer, or we can sit with uncertainty for longer. We might find that we can spot an emotion and identify it and then just carry on without acting on it. We might see a familiar pattern rising up in us, and rather than panic, say, oh, this is that thing I do when I'm sad. We might hear a voice in our head telling us to keep something and find that we're able to say, I know I feel like I want to keep it, but that's hoarding disorder talking, and that's not who I want to listen to anymore. When we are able to recognize those patterns in ourselves, that can feel really empowering. When we can spot early that we're getting overwhelmed, for instance, rather than waiting till we're in full panic mode, or when we can identify something that might be a trigger, when we learn through doing which categories of items might be harder to deal with, and anticipate that and plan accordingly. Another indicator that we're making gradual progress is how quickly we recover. If we do some dehoarding and it's hard, or if we're having an emotionally difficult time, early on in our dehoarding progress, a difficult dehoarding session might derail us for ages. But as we practice pacing and as we get better at recognizing that potential overwhelm and flooding early on and stopping before it hits, and we build up our tolerance gradually, we might feel rough for a day, not even that long even, and bounce back more quickly. Not always, because whoever invented healing had the audacity to not make it linear. But our confidence grows that even when it is difficult, we can recover from that, we can get through that, we'll be okay. Our trust that we can handle the difficult stuff also can grow. Gradually, gently, we might start to feel some confidence that even if it gets hard, or even when it gets hard, we'll be okay. And this is such an important shift. If we start to believe that even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's upsetting, even if it's exhausting, we can feel those emotions without them destroying us, we then learn that panicking doesn't mean we're about to make a mistake. We learn that finding a decision difficult doesn't mean we have to default to the old pattern. We learn that if we're unsure and we make a decision anyway, we come to terms with the decision we made. We develop confidence and faith in ourselves and in our resilience. Because when we expect ourselves to emotionally be fixed, be over it immediately, we set ourselves up for disappointment. That's not how it works. And we set ourselves up for deep shame as well. We tell ourselves, and I've said this to myself 1,000 times this year, we should be better by now. We shouldn't have these feelings anymore. We should be past this. And that shame and beating ourselves up makes everything harder. It doesn't help us. It doesn't power us on. It just shrinks us. But when we pace ourselves, we have permission to still find it hard. We have permission to struggle with it. We have permission to feel the feelings, but while also gently, tentatively, and then more confidently building those new pathways that teach us that there are other ways to cope, there are other ways to live. Ultimately, when we pace ourselves both physically and emotionally, it helps us to learn to work with our feelings and emotions and reactions, not shut them down or run away from them or shout at ourselves for them. So, how do we pace ourselves? It's all very well saying it's good and helpful, but how do we do it? And there's different approaches to pacing. And so I'm going to go through some of them. And so as you listen, see which feels to you like, yeah, that sounds like something that fits with the kind of approach I have to life, or that fits with my kind of coping. So one is a time-based approach. Set a timer for a manageable chunk of time and just work for that long. Choose a time that feels doable, that's maybe a bit of a stretch goal, but not daunting. You might schedule regular days off. You never do any dehoarding on a Monday, for instance. You might never do more than 3 days in a row, whatever works with your energy and your schedule. And thinking about small, consistent sessions rather than full weekend marathons every 6 months. There's power in showing up regularly and sustainably in a way that an exhausting, overwhelming marathon might just not have. If time-based approaches don't tend to work for you, think about decision-based approaches. You might want to say you'll make decisions about 10 items or one hard item or 50 items. You know your parameters better than I do. The number doesn't matter so much as tuning into your own goals and capacity. Decision fatigue is real. And so limiting the number of choices you have to make can really be powerful in pacing. And also, when you get to know which areas, whether that's like rooms in your house or whether that's categories of items, when you get to know which ones you find easier and which ones you find harder, that can help you to assess on a day, am I feeling really emotionally strong today and I feel like I can maybe tackle the task I've been dreading? Or do I feel a bit emotionally fragile? And in that case, I'm going to go for one of the tasks or one of the rooms or one of the categories that is a bit more gentle for me and comes a bit more naturally. If I'm having a hard time myself, I know not to go for the really nostalgic stuff. I know not to go for the things that have come from people who've died. I know that when something is overt rubbish, an empty Pepsi Max can or an empty something else, that for me is relatively easy. They may be opposite for you. But as we get to know what's easier for us and what's harder for us, we can gauge that and we can gauge our emotional capacity and our physical capacity and make decisions accordingly. And also, in terms of pacing and keeping ourselves going, quick wins are good. Areas where we might feel we might be able to make more visible progress, that can be good. If we're feeling like we might be a bit just tired and fed up of it, we may need the boost that comes from not doing our planned task, but doing a thing that feels rewarding. Another way of pacing is checking in with ourselves as we go. And that can be emotionally or it can be physically. So let's look physically. We might want to be dehoarding and then every 20 minutes, do a bit of a body scan. Is my back hurting? Are my arms aching? Are my knees wobbling a bit from carrying? Am I getting a headache? And if so, maybe consider having a rest. Maybe consider stopping for the day. And in the same way, we can do those check-ins looking at the signals our minds are giving us. Are we getting tense because we're anxious? Are our thoughts getting faster and overwhelming and panicky? Have our thoughts disappeared entirely and we've dissociated? We might be, in those cases, overwhelmed and need to stop. And often if we don't check in, we don't notice until we're fully in a panic attack or we're fully in some kind of collapse. Stopping before we hit the wall rather than after makes such a difference. And it is hard because often we want to push through. We can be a bit, I've started this, I may as well finish it. Just do one more thing. I'll just do one more thing. But stopping when we still feel okay teaches our bodies and minds that this is not dangerous for us, that this is not risky or threatening, that dehoarding is something we can do continually. If we only ever stop because we are flat on the floor and emotionally overwrought. We're training ourselves that dehoarding is suffering, and you have to force yourself through it until you literally can't anymore. So when we have those check-ins, we can remind ourselves, okay, I don't have to work myself into the ground before I can stop. In fact, it's better if I don't. And also in terms of pacing, building something in afterwards that's a nice reward can be incredibly helpful for replenishing our soul and our energy. This isn't a shopping spree. This is a phone call with a friend. This is a sitting in the sun and looking at your favourite view. This is a nice cup of tea or filling the hot water bottle, stroking your dog, something that helps your nervous system settle and your body start to recover and relax. It reminds you that you're okay, that this doesn't have to be grueling, and that you can do something hard and look after yourself. So how do we know when we are pacing ourselves in a sustainable way? Because it might look like we're making less progress when we do. But what it is progress we can maintain. It's progress we can keep up with. So one sign that we are pacing things sustainably is that we finish a session of dehoarding feeling tired, but not absolutely destroyed. We've done something that took effort, whether physically or emotionally or both. We might feel ready for a break. We might feel a bit achy or a bit wobbly, but we're not shattered physically or emotionally. We're not collapsing physically or emotionally or dreading the thought of ever doing this again. It's more of a, I did something really productive and now it's time to stop feeling. Another sign that we are pacing more sustainably is when we are able to come back to our next dehoarding session without feeling full of dread. If we manage that, we might be doing okay at pacing. When you think about your next dehoarding task, you might feel nervousness, you might feel a bit of anxiety or a bit of wariness. But if it's full-on dread or horror, that may be a sign of a not quite pacing things in the most optimal way. When we're not making excuses to avoid dehoarding, when we feel like we can show up again, that can show that on some level we understand that we do and will respect our own limits, and that's a powerful thing. And when we're pacing sustainably, we're far more likely to be making decisions that when we think about them later, we feel good about, whether that's keeping or letting go of items. We look back and feel as confident as we can that we did our best. We're not lying awake, replaying or full of regret or panic. We're trusting that we made the best decision we could in the circumstances and it will almost certainly be fine. And I think we can also see the benefits of pacing when we have moments where we might actually find ourselves enjoying our space or feeling proud of ourselves as things gradually change and shift. Because that's what it's all about. As our homes become more functional, clearer, maybe more reflective of who we are or how we want them to look. Maybe the kind of places we might be able to invite people over to, places we can feel pleasure. That keeps us going and it shows us why we're doing what we're doing and what we're working towards, which is not perfection. It's a space that works for us, not against us. Everybody's pace is different, and our own pace varies according to whether we're recovering from a cold, whether we're feeling especially happy or sad, whether it's dark and cold or warm and sunny, whether we have 3 jobs and 3 kids. There's a whole lot of factors that affect our pacing that vary from person to person, but also vary from season to season within us. And it's about finding the pace that works for us in this season we're in. Making fast, dramatic progress and then shutting down emotionally isn't the way. Doesn't help us in the long run. No one benefits when we burn out. No one benefits when we collapse. When we do it step by step and pace ourselves, we build actual skills. We develop actual insight into what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we think a certain way or behave a certain way. And we are set up to create a more lasting change. So approach pacing with compassion for yourself. Is the compassionate thing to push yourself until you need painkillers to get out of bed? Or is the compassionate thing to check in with your body and mind every half hour and stop before you're in a crisis? Think about how you can identify your limits and honour them. Be gentle with yourself and celebrate progress as the flawed but brilliant human that you are. This is hard work. It takes guts and it takes persistence. And you deserve a good end result. You don't deserve to destroy yourself in the process of achieving that. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Chirp Your Home, a decluttering and organising course for overwhelmed people. Amy, a declutter coach and professional organiser, has condensed down a range of tools and techniques which she's developed with clients over the past 5 years. Chirp Your Home is a course that uses a mixture of reflective exercises and practical tools with lots of options and opportunities to adapt methods to work for you as an individual. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. The course is in audio format with accompanying worksheets, and it's split across 4 modules. If you're worried about finding the time to work through the course, Amy also runs a free body doubling group twice a week that you can use to work through the course in your own time. Visit chirpyourhome.podia.com, that's chirpyourhome.podia.com, and use voucher code OCHPOD for 15% off.